G'day, it's Pete here, and today I wanted to start a new series where I talk about my ideas for the future of Bridge. And whenever I get an idea, I want to just sort of spitball it and get your feedback. So if you've got any comments on this, I'd love to hear it down below. But today I wanted to talk about new players in Bridge and what I think can be done. So for this, I think it's worthwhile looking at what do the new players need to learn before they can actually start playing, and where can they actually play? So this is sort of twofold because there's a vast difference between learning to play at a club and learning to play online. And I want to address both of those, but I think both have significant room for improvement. I do think learning at a club's a better way to actually start, but the way that is most commonly done at clubs is like maybe you sign up for a 6-week course and you get slowly taught the game over that. Whereas there's no way to just at a club, hey, I want to jump in, I want to play. Okay, here are the mechanics of the game. Let's jump in, let's get you started. Online, you can maybe watch some videos about doing it. Maybe you can find like the Learn to Play Bridge app, but there's really not that many great ways to actually learn online. And I think that really needs to be addressed. Now, I like to look at different games for inspiration for how they actually do it. And over the last year or so, I've been trying to learn chess. And I learned the mechanics as a kid, but jumping it back in, I've been trying to teach myself more and more. And I had a thought about how do they actually teach people chess that is so different from teaching bridge? And I realized before you learn to play bridge, in bidding, most people will teach you, okay, this is Stayman. Maybe they teach you transfers. They teach you about doubles. Oh, if you want a bit of slam, let's learn Blackwood. And it made me thinking that imagine if you jump in and played chess, that they said, okay, you have to do a specific opening. Now, the most studied opening in chess, I believe, is the Ruy Lopez, which I don't actually play. But imagine if when you were learning chess, they said, okay, well, you have to start like this, and we're going to bring out our pieces like this. And if your opponent plays the knight here, you have to do this. This is the Ruy Lopez opening. And I got an image of, this is Garry Kasparov's, all of his data set on it. And basically I got to this point in his data set before that. Now imagine learning bridge that they said, okay, you have to actually be able to, before you can play, you have to be able to get to this point of doing this. Now this is... you got to learn Stayman, you got to learn transfers, Blackwood, doubles, all that. This is how I visualize we're trying to be teaching people to actually play. So before you can jump in, you can't just play chess and do whatever you want, or you can't jump in and play bridge. You got to learn these before you can actually play. How many beginners courses do you know that would teach these sorts of mechanics rather than how they would actually teach beginners in chess, where when you learn, okay, if you want to move a pawn, it can move 1 or 2 spots up, but 2 only the first time. A knight can jump over and move like this. The bishops can move on diagonals. Go. That's how they like to do it. In bridge, we often like talk about, okay, so when you're bidding, okay, when partner bids Stayman, you have to respond this way and this way. Now, I think there's lots of interest in there. I don't think it's worthwhile getting rid of all that, but I think there needs to be something beforehand that people actually can jump in and bid what they want to bid and play how they want to play and sort of discover what they actually enjoy about it. They get to play with cards. They get to try out different bids that aren't all the conventions. Learning conventions can be fun for people, but I don't think it's a necessary step in learning to play bridge. I reckon it would be much better if people had a way that they could jump in, they could start playing, they could bid what they wanted to bid, and they could actually see how it works. Another thing that I want to show you is there's a game design conference where they talk about people that are designing video games and things like that. But I think there's lots of interesting aspects that can come from that, what knowledge they've actually pieced together there. And here there's a talk from someone who's designed a really popular digital card game. And they're talking about depth versus complexity. You don't need to know anything about the game, but I reckon it's really interesting, and I want to sort of highlight this and then talk about how that can be addressed with bridge.
So I love games that are simple and have a lot of depth. A lot of people use these words, complexity and depth, differently. So here's how I'm going to define them today. Complexity is the cost you pay before you can play the game.
So I love this definition of complexity versus depth. And Bridge is like a really high complexity, high depth game. And there's so much fun in it. But I think what people are missing is we really want to address the cost people pay to actually start playing the game. Because all the way along your journey of Bridge, there's so much depth and so much that you can actually enjoy. And as you learn more, you can do more. But we really want to find ways that you can lower the barrier of entry here, the cost that people pay before they can actually start enjoying the game.
It's the learning you have to do. Depth is the fun part. It's the interesting decisions. A lot of players want deep games, and it's true that you have to add complexity to add depth. So people see games with lots of complexity, and they assume it's got the depth that they're looking for in a game. But you can add complexity that doesn't add any depth. For example, if we had a rule that says every time you play a card in Marvel Snap, you have to yell the name of your card into the microphone or you lose, that's an important rule. You have to learn that rule, but it doesn't add any interesting depth to the game.
So Bridge has heaps of different rules that some will add extra depth, some won't. For instance, our scoring system is unbelievably complex, such that I think that the vast majority of Bridge players don't actually know how the scoring system actually works. Does it add depth? Yes. Is it overly complex? Yeah. There's also things like alerting procedures and what you have to announce to the opponents and all kinds of other things that you need to be able to do before you can actually start playing, which doesn't actually add depth to the game and unnecessarily burdens new players.
On the other end, there's complexity that yields an outsized amount of depth. We often call mechanics that yield a lot of depth for a small amount of complexity elegant designs. This top right box, I chose Magic the Gathering because it has a huge amount of depth, but also AI researchers called it the world's most complex game.
Yeah, so if I had to put Bridge on here, I would be putting Bridge up in this sort of top right area as well. But I don't think that when you're starting out and playing it, it needs to be all that way. I don't think it's a straight line where you have to know every bit of the conventions or everything before you can jump into the card play and the bidding and just have it sort of simplified that you can get in and get your hands a bit dirty before actually fully understanding everything there.
So you can mitigate, adding more depth by slowly introducing new concepts over time, right? And if you get more depth by adding complexity, shouldn't you just keep adding more complexity to get more of that depth? I actually think there's a depth limit. If your game already takes a lifetime to master, what does adding more depth get you? More lifetimes? You only get one. So I think the goal is, how do you reach the depth limit with the smallest amount of complexity? So if your game has this much depth, perhaps you should remove complexity and depth until you get there. I hope the little star is visible there. However, removing complexity can have a weird effect on your team.
So in this next part, what he actually talks about is in this game that they had this mechanic, a bug came up and then it didn't operate quite right. And they're like, hey, that was pretty complex. Let's just make it a bit simpler. But then people came to him, the developers were like, hey, but that removes all these interesting decisions that people could make along the way.
This is simpler if they just keep taunt forever. They just always have taunt. So let's just not fix the bug. And a lot of members on the team came up to us and said, hey, the game just got a lot less deep. There's like all this really interesting combat decisions where you're trying to drop taunt in the correct order. And they're not wrong. It's less deep. But the thing is, the team had already paid all of the complexity cost to learn how this works. So when you remove complexity, they only feel the resulting loss of depth.
I think this is the main point from this whole talk that really hit home for me, which is that all the people that are making decisions about Bridge, they've already paid all of the complexity cost. They know all the conventions. So coming up with these ways that, hey, let's play some tournaments that don't have conventions in it, or areas where you can jump in and just play cards. they feel like that makes the game less deep. And they're not wrong. But we don't need it to be that deep for everyone. Like, I reckon it would be really interesting to play tournaments where you don't actually play conventions. And I feel that would be a lower barrier of entry for beginners, but also an interesting problem still to solve for the people that play it. It's not like you wouldn't be posed different challenges. You might be thinking, oh, but I wish I could use transfers in this spot. But there are still ways that you might be able to do it, and you can then work out how to solve it. And it's still an interesting problem. Now, don't get me wrong, I still want lots of tournaments where you can play all kinds of system and do stuff. But I reckon it'd be really interesting if you had this other avenue, an other type of tournament. And I reckon that would be a great way to sort of streamline people in, and they can play with all kinds of levels, and they can get the addiction to Bridge. And then when they want to learn all of the system, they can jump in and take that time. They can delve in, but only if they actually want to. I think we really need ways where people can play the game, where they can jump in, they can play cards, they can bid what they want to bid, and do whatever they want to do without having to learn so much system, all the complexity that they have to pay before they actually get to the fun part. So what I would actually like to do is have some tournaments without conventions played. When people are learning the game, they jump in. There's no wrong bids that they can make. Let them explore and play cards and see what they want to do. So what if they bid a no trump with a singleton? So what if they do it with a 23 count? So what if they lead low from a sequence rather than top of a sequence? None of that matters for getting them in and trying to enjoy and learn, rather than actually trying to tell them that you have to lead top of a sequence, you have to play Stamen, you have to play transfers. That doubles a takeout double. That's not the fun stuff that they want to do. They want to jump in and actually play. So for fixing this for online and in clubs, I think is really, really interesting. Online, I would love a spot where people can play against robots that play zero conventions, and you can just jump in and bid what you want to bid. Or maybe a bidding practice area where you can bid with a partner and you can bid anything you want. And then at the end, maybe get oh, wow, you got to the best contract, or you got to a good contract, or yeah, there was better spots available, things like that where you could actually learn. But there's no real good spots for new people to come in and learn. Often people will say, oh, I want to play, but where do I get started? And it's sad for me that currently I don't actually know. I don't know where I should be recommending people to go. But I feel if we address some of these issues, then we could actually have a better streamline to get new players in, and we could help the game really thrive. So hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. If you have any ideas or what you like or don't like, let me know. Chuck it in the comments down below. Bye for now.